College Tailgaters. My name is Chris America. We are coming to you. One is in Orlando. The other is my man, Mr. Sean Daly from Illinois. What's up, buddy?
Not much, like you said, back in Illinois. It's me, Sean Daly. You can find me on Twitter at Sean Tailgater. You can find the show at Tailgaters Pod. And
Yep.
yeah, you can find the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Scout Team Radio, 12ouncesports.com. That's 12ozsports.com.
Well, it's 12ozsportsradio.com. And they can also find that 12 Ounce Sports Radio channel on TuneIn, the TuneIn app, or TuneIn Radio. We're all over the place, man.
That's right. Everywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us. So
We're like
We're
Mr.
movers and
305. We're like Mr. 305,
Dale.
Mr. Worldwide.
That's right. Man, yeah, moving and shaking here.
Moving and shaking. How was your weekend, buddy?
It was good. I was actually in Omaha this weekend. I got to watch Nebraska lose with a bunch of Nebraska fans. Just on TV.
How was that?
You know, there's a road game. It was interesting.
Right.
Yeah, that was good times. Just had a buddy's wedding in Omaha, but back home now, and excited to talk about this weekend of college football.
Man, you are all over the place. You are Mr. Worldwide.
That's right, Dale.
Or at least Mr. Big Ten wide.
That's right. How was your weekend? You went to a game, right?
Yeah, I went to the UCF game. I'll talk about that a little bit later in the show when we talk about all the games that happened this weekend. But it's pretty good. I did my first Savage race, so I'm feeling a little tired, but I'm still going to bring the energy because that's what we do here at College Tailgaters.
That's a pretty intense name for a race. Savage race. Must not get any tougher than that.
Nah, man, you can't get any tougher than that. And we had some savage games out there yesterday. But before we roll into that, college basketball started this weekend, and I think college basketball is 20 times worse than college football when it comes to scheduling cupcakes. You see scores like I don't even know who Notre Dame played, but they won like 121-60. Like, who wants to watch a basketball game like that?
Now, some of them are like that. There is, starting on Tuesdays, there's that Champions Classic at the United Center in Chicago where you got Duke playing Michigan State and Kentucky plays Kansas. That's four of the top teams in the country right there. We're like 2 games into the season, though, and I'm already sick of Grayson Allen for Duke. I've had enough. He's almost got like the Perry Ellis vibe to him. Like, how long has he been at Duke? Like, Perry Ellis has been at Kansas since the 70s. And I'm already sick of Grayson Allen, so I'd really like for Miles Bridges and that Michigan State team to beat them.
You know, it's funny, too, that you mentioned him because he was the most hated college basketball player in, like, December, January of last season. And then all of a sudden, LeVar Ball shows up, and he's like, hold my beer. Yeah. And he makes Lonzo Ball, his son, the most hated basketball player. But to stick to this year's sports, the only thing more awful than the games this past weekend for college basketball was Bob Knight's comments earlier this week. He's talking ill of the dead.
Yeah, what a clown. This is, I heard this story. This is a guy who's closing in on 80 years old, trying to stay relevant, trying to get his name in the news. And an easy way to do that is to insult one of the greatest coaches in the history of the sport, not just college, but at any level. Going after a dead man who can't obviously defend himself. For what was his big issue? He said he was letting boosters run the program and recruiting violations and things like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the exact question was then, but his quote, and this is kind of paraphrasing, was that he didn't like the way that John Wooden did things. He thought John Wooden was a good guy. He was a good coach, but basically these boosters, and he named some booster that I guess is synonymous with the UCLA program back then, would handle recruiting, and Wooden would just handle coaching. And my whole thing is, dude, this was 50 years ago. Nobody cares anymore. Let it go.
Yeah, all these college kids, they're getting benefits. They're getting paid. Who cares? But, Bobby Knight, seriously, he's the one to get on his high horse. If you go to Bobby Knight's Wikipedia page and go to, like, the controversy section, it's broken up by decade. So you can look at his controversies in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, as he was choking players, hitting reporters. You can go ahead and get off your pedestal, Knight. Like, your opinion means very, very little to me.
He's probably used more chairs than let's say, what's his name, Mick Foley did in his whole entire wrestling career.
It's highly possible. So the sooner this Bob Knight story blows over and we don't have to talk about it, the happier I'll be.
Yeah. So, I mean, for now, that's going to be it for college basketball talk. Because, like I said, there's nothing else really going on. But we do have some good slated games. Usually have those, sometimes you'll have like those Big 10 versus Big 12 or Big 12 versus ACC type matchups earlier on in the season where the two conferences get together and schedule a whole bunch. I'm not sure which two conferences or which four conferences got together this year. But
well, the Big Ten ACC
excited.
does it every year, and
that's
that
what it
comes,
is.
I think it's next week.
Okay, cool. So that's always good to see. Now I don't know. I have to double check this. I saw that it was a rumor that Butch Jones informed his staff over at Tennessee that he was no longer with the program. Were you able to confirm that at all, or did you see anything?
Yeah, Butch Jones is out. So, I didn't know about him telling the staff or whatever, but, ESPN's reported in multiple places, have reported it. Butch Jones is out at Tennessee in kind of the biggest no-duh move of the weekend. This has been a long time coming.
I was kind of surprised Florida beat him to it.
Yeah, if I had to put money down at the beginning of the year, like who would be the first to go, Butch Jones would be right at the top of that list. I was actually surprised he didn't get like the Lane Kiffin treatment, and like they didn't just like leave him outside the bus or like leave him at the airport or something.
Yeah. If
it's
I'm not
been
mistaken,
awful.
Florida has fired two coaches before they were able to fire Butch Jones, which is pretty sad.
Yeah, it's a shame because Tennessee, they've been a joke for since like the Fulmer
since they
times?
fired Philip Fulmer, man.
Yeah,
they thought the grass was greener on the other side, and what they got was a cesspool wasteland dump, going from Kiffin to I think it was Dooley to I think there might have been a coach there in between, and then to Butch Jones.
Yeah, so who's going to want this job next? I mean, it should be a premier program. They have great facilities. Their practice and like workout facilities are incredible. But who wants to get their fingerprints on this train wreck?
I heard that the biggest rumor right now, obviously, and this comes up all the time, but it's John Gruden, and I really hope this happens for two reasons. One, we can get his god-awful commentary off of Monday Night Football. Maybe Monday Night Football can go back to being a respectable primetime football entertainment. And then two, I think he's a god-awful coach who ran the Tampa Bay Buccaneers into the ground, took Tony Dungy's team, and just utterly abused it. And Tampa has not been able to recover since. And I hope he does the same for Tennessee.
Yeah, we'll see if he takes that job. From what I've seen here, there's only 2 Hooters locations in Knoxville, so I'm not sure that's enough for him. But yeah, we'll see. Gruden, man, he is up there though. Like despite everything about his coaching, and I know you don't like him on Monday Night Football. I'd love to go get a beer with that guy, and see who. I'm pretty sure he shares a barber with John Daly, or like they cut each other's hair. But I want to get in on that too because they got some of the best hair in the game.
Do you think when he rolled into the barbershop for the first time, he's like, hey, you know that movie with the Chucky doll? That's what I want to see, okay? That's the haircut I want.
Probably. He probably has like that picture in his wallet or something. He's just ready to go.
Yeah, just shows it to the barber. Says, this is what I want. Give me the Chucky.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on from that garbage of Tennessee's program. Let's start off with Washington losing to Stanford Friday Night Football.
Yeah, Friday Night Lights. Nobody wants to win the Pac-12. Yeah, this game, as Bryce Love goes, so does the Stanford Cardinal. He had a big game. I think he had 3 touchdowns, and they win. He was shut down last week, and Stanford lost. He was out the week before, and they almost lost that game to Oregon State. Their whole offense is Bryce Love, and when he has a good game, they're capable of beating pretty much any team in the country.
And I think with Washington losing, that about wraps up Pac-12's chances of making a playoff spot.
Yeah, I would agree. There could always be some craziness in like a 2-loss USC or maybe even Washington if they win out. But no, I think the Pac-12 they're playing from behind and they need a lot of help right now.
Yeah, I think it would take another Notre Dame loss, another Penn State loss, and another Ohio State loss for that 2-loss USC team to get in. It would be hard-pressed to see a team that's been blown out twice to get into the playoff, especially when one of the teams that blew them out has one loss right now.
Yeah, it's people are going to claim like East Coast bias and all this, and the Pac-12 games are on too late, but none of those teams are just really very good, and I don't think any of them deserve to be in the playoff discussion at this point, at least, unless, like you said, a lot of things at the top happen.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to start the show off with good news for you, buddy. I got good news.
Yes, you do.
Notre Dame finally loses, and in spectacular fashion do they lose.
In the most Notre Dame fashion of all time. You know, like how Clemson is like, they Clemson every year. It's like a verb. Like this was like how they Notre Damed this game. And I don't know if I need to like thank God, thank touchdown Jesus, but the turnover chain. The turnover chain was awarded 4 times in this game. The U is back. And I think we got a lot of questions answered about Miami. People were doubting if they were real or not. Their win over Virginia Tech was good, but again, Virginia Tech was, ranked in the mid-teens, and, how impressive is that?
And then it became even worse for Miami because they lost to Georgia Tech yesterday as well.
Right.
But rolling Notre Dame, I feel like, solidifies them using what the college football committee has been telling us week in and week out since they came back this season. Miami deserves to be the number 1 team in the nation with that win. They beat their number 3 team, the committee's number 3 team. They beat them, and they beat them in just dominant fashion. They just, every phase of the game, they came out ready for Notre Dame, ready for that primetime spot, ready for Kirk Herbstreit. And they just rolled, man.
They did, and they looked really good. I would not be opposed to them being the number 1 team. I don't think that's realistically going to happen this week. I think they come in at number 2. I think Bama's going to move up despite their struggles. But I think there's no way Miami's not a top 4 team right now. It's absurd to think otherwise.
There's no way they can't be there's no way they can be they're not a top 2 team. I heard an ESPN analyst say that they're the number 4 team, and they basically listed off all their reasons about how their close wins just don't impress them and everything. And what it really is people just don't like to admit that they were wrong. They don't like to admit that they didn't see Miami coming, that they didn't know that Miami was going to be this good. So instead of just coming out and saying, I was wrong in the preseason, Miami's definitely proven themselves, they hold on to every last bit and keep them at number 4. They come up with every single excuse. Like, how is Clemson, who lost to Syracuse, and who would be the number 2 team or the number 3 team? Would that be Oklahoma? How does another 1-loss team? How do 2 1-loss teams go ahead of an undefeated Miami who just rolled the number 3 team in the nation?
Right, and then also the quality win over Virginia Tech. So it's not just a fluke thing. I would agree. I would say Miami has to be top 2. I think the committee will put him at 2.
Yeah.
But we'll see. A lot of that's going to take care of itself when you get towards the ACC championship game. Because only one team from that conference is going to make it. So
I agree, but I hate that people use that logic with Miami, but we don't do it with Alabama, or we didn't do it with Georgia when they say, like, let Georgia prove themselves, let Alabama prove themselves. To me, I feel like Miami definitely solidified themselves for now from what we've seen as the number 1 team in the nation. I mean, that turnover chain's going. Maybe Butch Jones should have used a turnover chain instead of a turnover trash can, whatever he was using to motivate his kids. I don't know why.
Like an air trash bag, can. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. All right, so let's talk about Georgia. They got exposed completely.
Yeah, this was one of the bigger surprises for me. And we talked about this game last week, and you asked me. I remember you asked if Auburn had a chance, and I said no. And then we started talking about it, and I was like, don't sleep on Auburn. They might take this one. And, holy cow. They rattled off 30 unanswered at one point in that game.
Yeah.
They're extremely efficient offensively, both in the air and on the ground. Fromm on Georgia, he's a good player, but he's young. He didn't have a bad game, but he's also, at this point in his career, he's not going to carry you to a lot of wins.
No.
But yeah, Auburn looks like a legitimate contender in the SEC, and it's setting up a pretty interesting Iron Bowl.
Yeah, this game proves why Florida needs to hire an elite spread offense coach. Either Chip Kelly, Scott Frost, somebody who has a high pedigree in the spread offense, because this is going to be the number one team in the East until Tennessee, South Carolina, and maybe Kentucky can prove otherwise. But Georgia's it right now, and this is the team that Florida's going to have to beat. And Kirby Smart has proven year in and year out when he was at Alabama, he cannot coach a defense against a spread option team. Or at least not one that is as highly rated as a team like Auburn this year. When Kirby Smart's defenses went against Clemson, Clemson rattled off 42 points against his defense. And it's the same with Nick Saban as well. Nick Saban's going to be the top dog. His defenses prove, even without Kirby Smart there last year, he couldn't stop that spread offense attack late in the game, in the national title game.
Yeah, and with this game, I'm just happy for Auburn. We were talking at the beginning of the year about Gus Malzahn being on the hot seat, and it was his time up down there in Auburn. And now they have a realistic shot to make it into the playoff. If they win out and they can win the SEC championship, it's going to be tough to keep them out, even at 2 losses. With Notre Dame losing, especially with Notre Dame losing, I think a 2-loss conference champion has a real chance right now of making the playoff.
Yeah, I mean, Georgia and we'll talk about that a little bit later, but Georgia and Notre Dame losing definitely opens up the door a little bit. It's cracked for those 2-loss teams to kind of get in. But you still doubted your Wisconsin Badgers. They're still your number one contender for definitely getting into the playoffs for the Big Ten. They basically rolled Iowa in Wisconsin fashion, man. Are you believing now?
No, and I swear,
come on, man, you're worse. You're worse than Anthony with Miami, man.
I'm currently wearing a Wisconsin T-shirt. I'm not a hater at all, but I am not a believer. This game, Hornibrook turned it over 3 times. He had 3 picks. 2 were returned for touchdowns. That was the only points Iowa scored. So, credit to Wisconsin defense. They didn't give up a point. Hornibrook just threw the 2 pick sixes. He also fumbled in that game. 4 turnovers. Well, I think he kept the fumble. So 3 turnovers and a fumble. If he pulls something like that against Michigan next week, and Michigan has an elite, top-level, top-tier defense, if you turn it over 3 times, I keep saying this. I sound like a broken record. I keep saying if Hornibrook keeps playing like this, they're not going to keep winning, and they win week in and week out. So maybe I'm selling their defense short. Their defense is great at Wisconsin.
Well, no, in defense to you, that's what you said about the Miami quarterback. If he turned the ball over as much as he did against Virginia Tech, against Notre Dame, little did we know that it was going to be Notre Dame who was going to be turning over the football a lot.
Yeah, Malik Rozier had a great game, held on to the ball, but I don't trust Hornibrook. I don't know.
Once again, a typical Wisconsin game. Iowa was playing them close. I think at one point late in the game it was 17-14. And then I look at the scoreboard. Next thing I know, Wisconsin scores a touchdown. Then I'm watching another game, and there's like another highlight for another touchdown, and it's 38-14 or 38-17, and that's the final score.
Yeah, and Taylor is a true freshman. He is one of the best running backs in the country. He doesn't get enough credit. And I think that goes back to just like people view Wisconsin running backs as system running backs. It goes all the way back to Ron Dane. You got Melvin Gordon, guys like that, where you just assume Wisconsin running backs would be great. But he is, he could be in the Heisman discussion, especially with Barkley struggling. Love had a good game this week, but he had a bad one the week before. He is a top-level running back with a very strong defense. It's just the quarterback play really, really bothers me, and it makes me nervous in a big game.
Yeah, and speaking of Iowa, we'll flip over to the Iowa State, to their rivals. They fall just short in a shootout against Oklahoma State. This is kind of a different game for Iowa State. They've been winning a lot of these games, or maybe even losing these games, in like these 24-17 or 17-10. I think maybe the highest scoring game before last night was Iowa State versus Oklahoma, where they won 38-35. This one was 49-42. Iowa State they look, like you said, their story is better than their football team. And Oklahoma State keeps themselves alive. as one of those possible 2-loss teams that could maybe make it to the playoffs if we have some more upsets along the way.
Right, and Oklahoma State right now is currently in a tie for second place in the Big 12. And we've talked about the Big 12 is just taking the top 2 teams, which I really, really like for championship games. Just take the 2 best teams. So, the door's still open for them. If they, come up against Oklahoma and they win, that puts them ahead of Oklahoma. It might put them right in the playoff. But Iowa State was ahead most of this game. They lost their quarterback, I think, in the second quarter, and they still led most of this game. It's kind of their welcome to the Big 12. They finally played a Big 12 game there, scoring a bunch of points, giving up a bunch of points. But they don't have the players to keep up with a team like Oklahoma State. So not really all that surprising, but it was definitely the best early game. Kind of the early games were kind of all duds, other than this one. And like I said, feel bad for them. They lost their quarterback early, but they hung in tough. I don't think anyone's sleeping on this team anymore. Hopefully they can build on this moving forward.
Yeah, I missed all of the early games because, like you said earlier, I was at the UCF game. Went out to UCF, saw another great Scott Frost win. Offense was clicking. There's a couple of times they struggled a little bit in the third quarter. The game was a little bit closer than it should have been. And then fourth quarter turns and UCF just opened it back up. And they ended up winning 52-24, 54-24, something like that. Not much else to say there. I was kind of disappointed in the crowd, to be honest with you. But I think it says more about Orlando as a sports town than it does UCF. Orlando, you used to live here back in the day. You spent how many years did you live here?
I was down there for 2 years, and it's a tough sports town. It's similar to towns like Phoenix and whatnot, where nobody's from there really.
Right.
And it's really hard to tap into that local fan base.
And then I really wish Orlando would come out and support this team because right now they're red hot. They deserve to be ranked higher than they should, and they need the support of the town. I don't know how you keep Scott Frost there, whether it's Florida, Tennessee, Nebraska, whoever comes knocking. I don't know how you keep them there when you only have 20 to 25,000 fans in the stands.
Yeah, I told you I was in Omaha this weekend, and Scott Frost, his name got brought up a lot. Most people in that town seem to think it's a done deal that he's headed home back to Nebraska. But yeah, about UCF, there's not much to say, like you said. I wish them the best of luck in the Cotton Bowl because I think even if they go undefeated, there's no chance they're going to the playoff, which is a shame.
No, it really is, and I've always said that UCF is better than about 75 to 80% of the Power 5 teams. If you took all the Power 5 teams, I think they would be in the top 25%, which means if you put them in any conference, they'd probably have 2 losses right now, just like Ohio State, just like Oklahoma State, just like USC. So it's a shame that they don't get that consideration because they are a good team. Yes, is their competition not that great? No, but neither is about 75% of the Power 5 conference teams are any good. So,
yeah, I think what UCF, what they should be hoping for right now is one of those prime bowl games like the Cotton Bowl or something like that, and they face a big-time, Power 5 team, kind of like what Boise State did when they beat Oklahoma. And that gets you that national recognition, and then maybe next year you start out ranked, 12 instead of outside the rankings, and then you can play your way into the playoff. So they need this season to kind of parlay into next year and the following year. So they're going to need a big bowl win over probably a Power 5 team.
See, and this was where I kind of wish the BCS was still around because I think the BCS would put them in one of the old BCS bowl games, like an Orange Bowl or a Fiesta Bowl or something like that.
The BCS really valued that undefeated record. They'd probably be 7 or 8 in that sort of system.
Yeah, that too. And Utah played and destroyed Alabama in the Sugar Bowl in 2008. We saw what Boise State did. UCF again, 2013. They beat Baylor in the Fiesta Bowl. I'd love to see UCF play USC or, I don't know, Oklahoma State, something like that. I mean, Oklahoma State versus UCF would be a hell of a game. Yeah,
a lot of points scored. You could even put them up against someone stylistically who doesn't match up, like a Washington team with a good defense.
Oh, yeah, it'd be a great matchup.
Yeah, so we'll see. Yeah, there's not much they can do at this point. Just keep winning games and hope for the best.
Yep. I mean, really, what they need is they need the Big 12 to expand and show the Big 12 that, hey, we're the second biggest university in the United States. We have the 19th largest TV market, and we're in the state of Florida. So why not take us in? And then, hey, they could maybe do like TCU did. They got lucky and got in, but TCU got handled by Oklahoma.
They did, and it actually wasn't Kenny Football's fault this week. He played an all right game. Oklahoma's too much for them right now. Oklahoma to me feels kind of like that team of destiny right now, and Mayfield is just, he's leading that charge. He's the head of that team. He had another great game. I think he's running away with the Heisman right now, in my opinion. And they're marching on towards the playoff. They control their own destiny, so I think they're in if they keep winning.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think Mayfield just continues to solidify his Heisman candidacy. I don't see anybody else really. Maybe Love can give a run for it, but I think he's solidified it.
Yeah, I mean, especially since he keeps getting all these, not only wins, but these high-profile wins, and he's putting up ridiculous stats. He's got the aura about him. Yeah, I think they're one of the teams right now that I would not want to see on my schedule in front of me. They're playing with so much swagger, almost the Miami levels of swag. And, I mean, Mayfield, he's legit. He's not just the persona and, like, this character, kind of like a Johnny Football. He's a legitimate quarterback, and he shows up in big-time games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And he's the guy, like we said last week, that he's the kind of player you want to see in the playoff to make the playoffs more exciting. You want that top player in there.
It's can't miss TV when he's on in a big game.
So with Notre Dame out, they're probably in at number 4. Clemson will probably move up to 3. They were up big at first. Then FSU kind of came storming back, and there was a point where Clemson fumbled the ball, and it looked like, hey, FSU might actually pull off an amazing upset here. But then FSU did what they've done all season, and that's make the mistake, and they threw the interception, and I think Clemson rattled off 14 unanswered points after that.
Yeah, Florida State scored, and that was a 3-point game in the fourth quarter. So a lot closer than what the final score ended up looking like. And you got to question, if Clemson struggles with the Florida State team, their loss to Syracuse is looking worse and worse. Like, all these teams towards the top that do have 1 or 2 losses are against top teams. They're not against teams like Syracuse. So does Clemson deserve that top 4 spot right now? Are there other teams that maybe should be ahead of them at this point? Miami for sure has to jump them, right? Like, they have to jump
Miami
them.
And maybe even Oklahoma has to jump them too. Maybe you go Alabama, Miami 1 and 2, or Miami, Alabama, whichever one you want to go to. And maybe you go Oklahoma 3, and then, I mean, what do you feel about putting Wisconsin? Over Clemson? Yeah,
I wouldn't mind that at all at this point. I think, and even though, like I've said before, Wisconsin, their scores have looked a lot better than their games recently, they are still blowing teams out. And, I mean, this was an Iowa team that just went to Columbus and beat Ohio State handily. Like, they manhandled Ohio State. And Wisconsin takes them out behind the woodshed. So, if it was me running it, I'd probably go Alabama, Miami, Oklahoma, Wisconsin for now.
Gotcha. All right, so there was a stat after Georgia and after Notre Dame was pretty much wrapped up and sealed up, that game was signed, sealed, and delivered. There was a stat that said that the last time the 1, 2, and 3 team lost on the same day was 1966. And for all 4 quarters, everybody started believing that in Stark Vegas, Mississippi State was going to hit the jackpot. Man, did they ever let it slip right through their fingers. They had control of that game the whole entire game. And between Jalen Hurts running all over the field and a lot of quote-unquote missed penalties by the referees, Alabama escapes with the win and ruins the whole stat of the 1, 2, and 3 going down the same day. Way to ruin it, Alabama. Way to ruin our awesome, fun night of college football.
And I think escape is the appropriate word. Like you said, Bama was trailing going into the fourth quarter of that game. And you got to wonder, what would that offense be without Jalen Hurts? Because he may not have the Baker Mayfield stats, but he is a special player out there. As just, he's a true sophomore in the command he has of that offense and how he can, move the ball through the air and with his legs. He's a special player, like I said.
If this was any of the other previous Alabama quarterbacks, your McElroys, your JPWs, your McCarrons, your basic statues in the pocket, they would have lost this game. Mississippi State would have come out of that game with 10 to 15 sacks. And I'm not even lying. There were so many times where Mississippi State had Jalen Hurts dead to rights, and he would just sidestep and then just run the ball and get the first down. They just had no answer to just containing him. And if he, again, was that statue of a pocket passer that Alabama's had under Nick Saban, they would have not even come close.
No, and he'll never get the recognition of these top-flight quarterbacks, the Heisman hopefuls and all that, but he's an elite player, and he's the reason that they're still undefeated.
That and, like I said, there was 3 missed penalties. I don't know if you watched the game or not, but there was a play at the beginning of the game. It was 7-0. Alabama throws a 70-yard bomb, and the guy catches it, gets tackled, and I noticed there's this bald referee standing on the sideline with his hat off. And I'm like, so was he the first guy? Was he the guy that ran out of bounds? They show the replay. Guy clearly runs out of bounds. The referee throws his hat down, and he catches the ball. Then they go to the next play. ESPN doesn't replay it. The referees never, meet together to discuss what happened. It was like it never happened. The guy just picked up his hat, put it on, and it's just business as usual, and then touchdown Alabama. I don't know how you make that mistake. To me, I'm screaming conspiracy theory on that one. SEC couldn't.
Yeah, was it a mistake, or did Nick Saban give him that look?
He gave him that look, man, and it's that Bama effect. It's one thing to miss the call or to act like you didn't see the call, but you threw your hat on the ground. You saw what happened.
You're committed at that point.
Yeah. So how do you don't throw the flag after that? How ESPN doesn't even notice that this guy hat is off and that they don't make any mention of it whatsoever? Now, of course, McElroy is calling the game, and he's god-awful.
Yeah.
And his bias shows through so much for Alabama. That game was frustrating to watch, not because I hate Alabama, but I just hate when referees blatantly make mistakes and then ESPN blatantly doesn't call them out on it because they want the team that they want to win.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm drinking the conspiracy Kool-Aid quite as hard as you, but when you are a team like Bama, you get the benefit of the doubt much more probably than you should. And yeah, that's a tough one. When you throw the hat, that's tough to cover that up.
Yeah, man, it was bad. But you know what? Alabama wins. The other thing that I appreciated about Mississippi State is they blitzed a lot on that final drive. And I like that because I hate teams that have been playing really good defense and they switch up their game plan to that soft zone. And then they just let a team drive down and kick a field goal. So, I mean, it didn't work out in the end. But I appreciate the effort, though.
Yeah, you don't like we call that the Lovie Smith defense here. The prevents you from winning.
Prevents you from winning.
That's right.
All right, so we kind of weaved and bobbed and weaved in and out of the playoff talk discussion. So let's kind of solidify ourselves into it. Georgia, I think, is out for right now. Completely exposed. They have no solid wins. Their one solid win just got blown out by Miami. They have a lot of work to do. Obviously, beating Alabama will help them if they stay with one loss. But they have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I think if they win out, they're in.
Maybe, but I don't know if Georgia Tech might not be able or will be able to beat them. I don't know that they can't beat them.
Yeah, Georgia Tech, and we've talked a pretty good amount about Georgia Tech throughout the year. They're not an easy team to beat with that triple option attack. So you can never count them out of any game. But I think if Georgia wins out and they win the SEC, they beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. You're not putting Bama in ahead of Georgia with one loss, and Georgia just beat Bama, and the SEC's not getting shut out. That's just not a possibility at this point.
Now let's talk the other scenario though. Auburn beats Alabama, then comes back and beats Georgia again. Is that a 2-loss team that deserves to be in the playoff?
That's how you might end up with the Ohio State situation from last year. So you're saying that Bama doesn't play for the SEC championship game.
Right.
Right? So they're at home with one conference loss, and then they make the playoff when Auburn and Georgia play for the championship. Yeah,
I'm talking Auburn. Does Auburn get it? Like, I honestly, and I'll say this right now, if Auburn beats Alabama, let's say they even throttle them, and then they beat Georgia again, there's no way Alabama deserves to get in over Auburn. There's no way. I can understand if that loss happened back in October, and you can use that excuse that everybody likes to use, like, well, teams are different now, blah, 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 kind of like with Ohio State and Penn State.
Right.
But that wouldn't be the case this way. Like, you would have we have the very impressive win by Auburn yesterday. Then you fast forward 2 weeks from now, and another impressive win against probably number 1 Alabama, and then another impressive win against probably 5 or 6 Georgia. Man, it'd be hard to keep that Auburn team out and put that Alabama team in.
Yeah, I do have Auburn on my list of possible 2-loss teams that have a chance at making it. It's them along with Ohio State and maybe Oklahoma State have a chance of making the playoff with 2 losses. But I think those are the only 3 teams with a real shot with 2 losses. And it's all, like we said, due to Notre Dame and Georgia losing, mostly Notre Dame. Because I think that the committee will value a 2-loss conference champion more than a 1-loss Notre Dame team, especially with how that loss happened, being the blowout. But that conference championship, that means a lot to the committee. And Notre Dame's going to be at home not playing for one. So I think if Ohio State wins out and they beat an undefeated Wisconsin team in the Big Ten championship, or like you said, if Auburn wins out, they win the Iron Bowl, they beat Georgia, then I think one of those teams is going to be in.
I think right now, Auburn definitely has to be the highest ranked 2-loss team because their losses aren't as bad as the other 2-loss team out there. So they lost to Clemson 14-6 at Clemson at the beginning of the season. So if Clemson's a playoff game, that's a solid loss there. And then they lost at LSU 27-23. Is that a bad loss? It's a bad loss, but it's a 4-point loss, not as opposed to Ohio State, who was blown out by Iowa, who will probably be unranked after this week. And then obviously they have the blowout loss to Oklahoma.
Right.
Penn State,
and the polls are out. Yeah, the polls are out, and they have Auburn as the highest the highest ranked 2-loss team. And what I really, really like, they hit it on the head with this poll, is they put Auburn ahead of Georgia, even though Georgia's only got the 1 loss, because you're out of your mind if you think Georgia's a better team right now.
Oh, of course. And
so I'm happy they're
40 to 17.
Yeah, I'm happy they're not sitting too much on the record, and they're actually using their eyes to see what team is which, but. Yeah, a 2-loss Auburn, a 2-loss Ohio State, and even a 2-loss Oklahoma State, I think, all have cases to maybe sneak their way into that playoff.
Yeah, I honestly, no offense to you, man, I think Ohio State is the odd man out in those scenarios because, again, their 2 losses are blowout losses. And they don't really have many, other than Penn State, they don't have many big wins against top teams.
But yeah, if they win out though, that would Wisconsin would probably be top 3 or 4 at that time.
Either 1, yeah.
So that would be a good win.
If Oklahoma State won out, they would have Oklahoma in their sights.
Right. So there's definitely some things that have to happen. I think 1 2-loss team is going to make it. I think Notre Dame, a lot depends on what they do. If they don't blow the doors off of everyone they play the rest of the year, then I think they're going to be sitting at home. I think the value of the conference championship is there, and I think it's going to hurt them that they're not playing for one.
Right. Notre Dame is out. We'll say that, right?
For now,
Notre Dame is done. I mean, it would take a colossal collapse of a lot of other teams because, like you said, a lot of these 2-loss teams, like Oklahoma State, like Ohio State, like even Penn State. I don't know what the scenario is there. I'm pretty sure Penn State still has a chance to play for the Big Ten, right?
Yes, they need some help, but yeah.
Right. Okay, so those teams would go and win a conference championship, where Notre Dame would just be sitting at home twiddling their thumbs because they'd rather
bathing in their
count money
NBC
from.
money.
Yeah, they'd rather just count their NBC money than be in an actual conference. So
they're doing that like Scrooge McDuck dive into the pool of gold, and
right,
while everyone else is going to play for the playoff.
Yeah, I take that back. I think they're even further below Washington as a 2-loss team to get in.
Yeah, Georgia losing really didn't help Notre Dame, so we'll see.
And these last 2 weeks, Clemson and Notre Dame were pretty much locks. There wasn't anything they could do to get themselves bumped out the last 2 weeks. Is Oklahoma now getting that specialty treatment, do you think? Do you think they're locked in until they lose?
Yeah, I think they can win every game the rest of the year by 1 point, and nobody's going to jump them. I think they're in until, like I said, they control their own destiny. So unless they do something to actively remove themselves from the playoff discussion, then I think they're locked in probably at that 3 spot right now.
Yeah, I think their Murderers Row schedule, we talked about that 3 weeks ago, how they had a really tough schedule coming up, and they've handled it well. They've handled it like a championship team should handle that type of schedule. They handled it better than Ohio State handled theirs. They handled it better than Penn State handled theirs. And now we look at Michigan State. They handled it better than what Michigan State even did. So I think they're a lock. I think Clemson, they might be in trouble if Wisconsin goes undefeated and Clemson wins out. I think a lot of people will, if everybody wins out, it might be hard to keep Wisconsin out of that top 4 if everything stays the same.
Well, if Clemson wins out, Wisconsin's going to be in because that'll drop Miami out.
Oh, that's true. Well, I don't know. Do you think Miami gets that? You don't think Miami gets that benefit like we were giving Georgia, Alabama, where if it's a close loss, they stay in? Like we were talking with Alabama and Georgia?
I don't think the committee is that high on the ACC. And if it's that late in the season, I don't know. I think a 1-point loss probably bounces Miami. I think the committee's ready to bounce Miami. We've seen that through the rankings most of the year. I think they're kind of looking for any excuse they can to get rid of them. But I think if Clemson wins out, Miami's out, Wisconsin is in for sure at that point.
I forgot about that whole Miami-Clemson thing. That's my bad.
But Clemson has looked the most vulnerable of the top 4 for sure, and they're the ones who could get jumped, I think, without losing.
Right. It'll be interesting, to say the least. I can't wait to see what the polls come out. I was flabbergasted with the polls last week. I don't know why Michigan wasn't in the top 25, while teams like LSU and Northwestern were in. Just didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah,
there were some other things. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, they got Michigan now they're up. They were 21 last week in the AP. They're up to 19 now. So hopefully
but they were
that'll
left
be a
out
good
of
win for Wisconsin.
The college.
Yeah, they were left out of the
playoff committee poll.
Right. Which didn't make a lot of sense.
UCF was still at 18, and they had 4 teams with 2 losses above them that had no wins against the current top 25. There's just stuff like that really frustrated me.
Yeah. It's been interesting. I'm happy to see Michigan State drop down a bunch because I've been not sold on them all year, and they got blown out this week. Show that they're a bunch of fraud-ass bitches.
Yeah, I forgot to bring that up because I kind of didn't want to admit that we made like a non-bet where you said I'll take the -17 Ohio State, and I was like, no way they cover. But not only they cover, they like almost tripled the cover.
Yeah, it was a little absurd. Ohio State playing angry, which is one of the reasons I think that they can work their way back into it. It's just, their losses are bad, but their wins, other than Penn State, they're blowing everybody out. So,
yeah,
we'll see.
All right. Well, we talked about things were getting interesting until we look at this week's schedule. Not interesting at all.
No, like all these teams doing these like tune-ups. These late season cupcakes to get ready for the rivalry games. Oh man,
they're almost worse. They're almost worse than week 2 cupcake games. at least week 2, you kind of like are prepared for it, and you got a whole season to look forward to. Right now, like this past Saturday had me wired, had me ready to go, and then when I was prepping for the show and I pulled up next week's schedule, I was like, man, what a dud. Here's the 2 games I pulled up that I thought might be worth watching, and one of them is still kind of garbage to me. UCLA versus USC. I mean, it's a rivalry game. Those are okay teams, but UCLA's 5-5. USC's a fraud of a 2-loss team, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Another one of those 2-loss teams like Ohio State that's been blown out in both of their losses. Yeah, I mean that's one of the games that I had up there.
Yeah, I mean, if
Do
you're
you
a
have
fan,
anything else?
well, yeah, if you're a fan of a bad NFL team, you're probably watching that one. Your team scouts are probably there. You got Rosen and Darnold going, who neither have been overly impressive this year, but both are still projected as like top 5 picks. So
well,
I don't know if you're
like,
like,
these are definitely the 2 and 3 best football teams in LA, right? Like you get the Rams, USC, UCLA, and then the Chargers.
yeah, for sure. And it's really sad that Jared Goff is the best quarterback in LA right now. But
hey, this isn't an NFL show, but man, does Jared Goff look good this year in that offense?
Yeah. So yeah, if you're like a 49ers fan or like I don't know, the Jets may have won too many games to get out of this, but if you're a fan of one of those teams, you might be looking at your future quarterback. So I guess that's a reason to tune in. The only other game really worth watching is Wisconsin and Michigan. That game's up at Madison at Camp Randall.
Yeah, College Game Day is going to be there.
Yeah, it's a cool place to have game day. Wisconsin should win this game. I think they're like 8.5 or 9-point favorites right now. Michigan's got a very good defense, and they can always keep games close, especially if Hornibrook gives them the ball. But Michigan is kind of Wisconsin light. Like, they have bad quarterback play, just like Wisconsin. They have an elite defense, just like Wisconsin. But I think the Badgers have slightly better quarterback play and slightly better defense. If this game goes according to script, Wisconsin should be able to win this one at home.
Yeah, definitely. All right, man. Did you have any other games?
I had. Yeah, I want to know. I saw UAB is scheduled a cupcake this week. They're they're playing the Gators. How's that one going to turn out for Florida?
Right now I'm just waiting for the coaching hire news. That's about the only thing that can cheer me up right now. A lot of chatter about Chip Kelly, but I don't really pay attention to anything until I hear actual news people saying they have a source that inside Chip Kelly's camp, or I have a source inside Florida camp, and they're all saying that it's all but done deal. They're just working out numbers. That's when I get really excited. So I'm just waiting for that ball to drop.
Well, where does Chip Kelly live? Because I'm big into, I do the flight tracking. So if I see a flight leave like Gainesville and Chip Kelly lives in like, I don't know, like Seattle, and there's a flight Gainesville to Seattle, I'm all over those rumors then. So
yeah, I might have to look that up for you so you can start looking at flight tracks for me.
Yeah. Now the only other game I was talking about, so we talked about the Ohio State spread this week against Michigan State. Do you think Ohio State can cover this week? They're at home and they're 38.5-point favorites over Illinois.
Man, I went against them this last time, and I got burnt. So I'm gonna say, yeah, they cover the spread.
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty safe bet. I can't remember the last time I saw an in-conference 38.5-point spread that didn't involve Kansas, but here we are.
Here's your sign.
That's right.
All right, man. Got any game balls?
I do. I have a game ball. I actually have 2 game balls. I got one is for the U. The swag is back in Miami. You know, they had their big win this week, of course. The turnover chain is mainstream. It's on every channel. You see it all over the place. Those teams in the 2000s in Miami were so much fun, and it's great to see them back in the spotlight. They even said Enrique Iglesias and Pitbull were playing a concert in Miami that had tickets available, and the Miami Notre Dame game was sold out. So the fans in Miami are getting into it, which is not easy. Miami, I mean, even when like LeBron was in Miami, those games weren't getting filled up till after halftime because there's so many better things to do in Miami than to sit inside for a while or go to a game. But this team has got the town so excited. They're selling out their games, and I would love to see them in the playoff. My other game ball.
Miami is definitely one of the biggest bandwagon towns in all of sports. So it is good to see that they can finally put seats in. There were times when Miami couldn't outdraw more than UCF. So it's good to see that Miami fans have finally remembered that there's a college football team in their city, and they're going out and supporting the Canes. But who's your other game ball?
I got another game ball, and it goes to the MAC, the Mid-American Conference as a whole. We talked about the games suck this week, but MACtion, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night, you have football every day of the week now. MACtion is like the greatest thing ever. In this conference, they don't even play. None of their teams play on Saturday. It's all MACtion, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They get the national spotlight. They know how to get their brand out there. It's a genius move by them, and I love it. I could watch football every day, and MACtion lets me. So, game ball to the MAC.
Game ball to the MAC, the MACtion.
Return of the MAC.
My game ball is going to go to Mr. Gus Malzahn. Like you had said earlier, it looked like people were calling for his head in Auburn. I remember, I don't know if it was on this show or if it was on Scout Team Sports, but I said that Texas A&M versus Auburn game was going to be whose coach is going to get fired if they lose. And he took it all in stride, man, and he's got this Auburn team, like we said, in the discussion of an outsider's chance of not only winning the SEC, but also making it to the playoffs as one of the first 2-loss teams ever to make it to the playoffs. So if Alabama comes out and plays like they did against Mississippi State, they're not winning that game in the Iron Bowl. So
no, it seems like the teams are trending in opposite directions, yeah.
Yeah, kudos to Gus Malzahn for turning his program around, to ignoring the hype, or not ignoring the hype, but ignoring the criticism and ignoring all of that negativity coming his way, and just doing what he's kind of done all the time at Auburn. Not consistently, but he's been a fairly decent coach and a winner, and it's good to see that he's able to get his team back into the top 6 with all that negativity towards coming his way.
Yeah, so props to him for ignoring all of your hate.
Yeah. Take that, Auburn fans.
Yeah.
He showed those guys. All right, that's our show, man.
All right.
Hopefully we have a surprise Saturday and we watch a whole bunch of upsets. Maybe Florida can upset that mighty UAB team.
Yeah, maybe Illinois can cover. It's like they say, good teams win, great teams cover. So 38.5, that's what we're playing for.
38.5. Let's go, baby.
All right.
Go Gators.
Go Illini.
See ya.
Later.